What happens when a confession meant to spark sympathy becomes the spark that burns an entire marriage to the ground? I'm Morwenna Vale, and I thought I was being honest. I thought I was being brave. I thought wrong. It started on a Tuesday night in November. Gareth was working late again, hunched over his laptop in our home office, the blue glow of his screen casting shadows across his tired face. Isabel was asleep upstairs, her small body curled under the princess comforter we'd bought for her 5th birthday last month. The house felt empty, despite having everyone home. I poured myself a 3rd glass of wine, maybe it was the 4th, I wasn't counting, and scrolled through my phone contacts. The Pinot Grigio made everything feel softer around the edges, including my judgment. Callum's name appeared on my screen, and before I could think better of it, my finger hit the call button. Morwenna? His voice was surprised but pleased. It's late. Everything okay? I don't know, I said, settling into the kitchen chair farthest from Gareth's office. Is anything ever really okay? I mean, we go through the motions, right? Work, dinner, bedtime stories, repeat. But when did I stop feeling like myself? Callum had joined our marketing firm 6 months ago. He was my ex from college, the one who'd made me laugh until my sides hurt, who'd written me poetry on napkins during our coffee dates. Seeing him again had awakened something I'd forgotten existed. You sound like you've been drinking, he said, but not unkindly. Maybe a little. Gareth's working again. Always working. Do you know he forgot to kiss me goodbye this morning? Just grabbed his coffee and left. I stood there in my robe feeling invisible. You're not invisible, Mor. You never were. The nickname hit me like a warm wave. Gareth called me Morwenna, always formal, always proper, but Callum had called me Mor since freshman year, and hearing it now made my chest tight with longing. I keep thinking about us, I whispered, glancing toward the office. About how we used to talk for hours, about how you'd look at me like I was the most interesting person in the world. Those were good times, he agreed carefully. They could be good times again. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. I think about leaving him, Callum. I think about it more than I should. There was silence on the other end. Then, Mor, you're married. You have Isabel. I know what I have, but what if it's not enough? What if I deserve more than this quiet, comfortable prison? You're talking crazy. You should probably get some sleep. I'm not crazy, I'm just awake. For the first time in years, I'm awake. I took another sip of wine, feeling bold and reckless. I could leave him, you know. I could do it. We could try again. Morwenna? I mean it, Callum. I really mean it. After I hung up, I sat in the kitchen for another hour, finishing the bottle and feeling like I'd crossed some invisible line. The wine made everything seem possible, even probable. I'd finally said what I'd been thinking for months. I'd been honest about my feelings, about my marriage, about the growing distance between Gareth and me. When I stumbled upstairs, Gareth was already in bed, his back turned to my side. I slipped under the covers, my head spinning slightly, and fell asleep, thinking about college coffee dates and napkin poetry. I woke the next morning to find Gareth holding my phone. You left this downstairs, he said quietly, handing it to me. It was buzzing. My heart hammered as I took it, trying to read his expression. Had he seen anything? The call log would show Callum's number at 11:47 p.m., lasting 23 minutes, but Gareth's face was unreadable as always. Thanks, I managed. He nodded and headed for the shower. I checked my messages with shaking fingers. There was one from Callum, sent at 7:15 a.m. You said you'd leave him. Was that real? I stared at the text, my mouth dry. In the harsh morning light, last night felt like a dream, or a nightmare. Had I really promised to leave my husband? Had I really meant it? I deleted the message quickly, but the damage was done. The seed was planted. And seeds, I was about to learn, have a way of growing into things you never intended. 3 weeks passed in a strange, tense quiet. Gareth seemed more distant than usual, if that was possible. He'd come home from work, kiss Isabel's forehead, nod at me, and disappear into his office. Our conversations became purely functional. Grocery lists, Isabel's school schedule, whose turn it was to take out the trash. Callum and I exchanged careful glances at work, nothing more. But the energy between us had shifted. There were lingering looks across the conference room, accidental touches when we reached for the same file. The possibility I'd voiced that night hung between us like a secret. Gareth's 36th birthday fell on a Friday. I'd made reservations at Bistro Laurent, his favourite restaurant, and invited his mother Marjorie, his brother Toby, and my best friend Claire with her husband Reuben. It was meant to be a celebration, a normal family dinner where we could pretend everything was fine. We gathered around the corner table, the one with the view of the city lights. Marjorie sat ramrod straight in her navy blazer, already disapproving of something, probably the wine list or my choice of dress. Toby was telling a story about his new apartment, gesturing with his breadstick. Claire kept shooting me concerned looks, the way she had ever since I'd confided about my confusing feelings regarding Callum. So the landlord says the heating will be fixed by Tuesday, Toby was saying, but I've been hearing that for 3 weeks now. You should document everything, Gareth said, cutting his steak with precise movements. Keep records. People respond to documentation. I took a large gulp of wine. Not everything has to be documented, Gareth. Sometimes people just need to communicate. Communication requires 2 parties willing to be honest, he replied without looking at me. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. Did he know? Had he figured out about the call, about Callum? Speaking of honesty, I heard myself saying, I think we should all be more open with each other. As a family. Claire's eyes widened. Morwenna, maybe we should... No, I want to say this. The wine was making me brave again, or stupid. I've been thinking a lot about truth lately, about how we all pretend everything's perfect when it's not. Marjorie set down her fork. What exactly are you suggesting, dear? I'm suggesting that marriages require honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. I looked around the table, feeling powerful and righteous. Gareth and I have been having some challenges, and part of that is because someone from my past has come back into my life. The table went silent. Toby stopped chewing. Reuben stared at his plate. Morwenna, Claire whispered urgently. It's okay, I said, reaching across to pat her hand. It's healthy to discuss these things. Callum Reed, he works at my company now. We used to date in college. And yes, we've been talking. Yes, there are feelings there. But I'm handling it maturely by being open about it. Gareth set down his knife and fork very carefully. You see, I continued, warming to my theme, the real problem isn't that Callum and I have a connection. The real problem is that my husband has become emotionally unavailable. When someone shows you attention after years of being ignored, it's natural to respond to that. Jesus Christ, Morwenna, Toby breathed. I'm not apologizing for being human, I said firmly. I'm not apologizing for having needs that aren't being met. What I'm doing is being honest about the situation so we can address it like adults. Marjorie's face had turned the color of her burgundy lipstick. You're discussing an affair at my son's birthday dinner. It's not an affair. It's a friendship with someone who actually listens to me. Someone who remembers what I was like before I became just Gareth's wife and Isabel's mother. I felt righteous, vindicated. I was the brave one, the honest one. I was refusing to live in the shadows of pretense and politeness that had suffocated our marriage. Gareth stood up slowly. He pulled out his wallet, placed enough cash on the table to cover the entire meal and tip, and walked toward the exit without saying a word. Gareth, I called after him, this is what I'm talking about. You can't just shut down when things get real. But he was gone. The table sat in stunned silence. Claire was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Toby looked between the door and me, clearly torn between following his brother and staying to manage the social wreckage. Well, I said, trying to keep my voice light, I guess that proves my point about communication issues. But inside, something was cracking. The righteous feeling was fading, replaced by a cold realization that I might have just made a terrible mistake. Claire leaned over and whispered, "You sure you know what you just did?" I smiled and nodded, but my hands were shaking as I reached for my wine glass. The weekend after the birthday dinner was the longest of my life. Gareth moved through the house like a ghost, speaking only when Isabel was present, and only about practical matters. He slept in the guest room, claiming he had early meetings, and didn't want to wake me. Monday morning brought the first real consequence of my honesty. I was barely at my desk when my supervisor, Janet, appeared with a concerned expression. "Morwenna, I need to see you in my office." My stomach dropped. Had word of the dinner somehow reached work? But how? Janet closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "I've received some concerning information about your working relationship with Callum Reed." "I'm sorry, what?" "There have been reports of inappropriate conduct, personal conversations during work hours, extended private meetings, that sort of thing." I felt my face flush. "Who reported this?" "That's not important. What's important is maintaining professional boundaries. I'm sure you understand." "Janet, I can assure you that Callum and I have maintained completely professional." "I'm not accusing anyone of anything specific," she interrupted. "I'm simply reminding you that office relationships can create complicated dynamics. Perhaps it would be best if you worked with different team members on upcoming projects." I nodded mutely, but inside I was seething. Someone had been watching us, reporting on us. Someone had decided to make my personal life their business. When I got home that evening, Isabel ran to greet me as usual, but something was off. Her hug was tighter, more desperate. "Mommy, are you and Daddy going to live in different houses?" My heart stopped. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "Grandma Marjorie was here today. She was talking to Daddy in the kitchen, and I heard her say something about making arrangements." I looked around the house. Everything appeared normal, but there was something different in the air, a sense of preparation, of things being quietly organized. "Did Daddy say anything to you about arrangements?" Isabel shook her head, but her eyes were worried. He seemed sad, and Grandma Marjorie looked angry. She didn't smile at me like she usually does. That night, after Isabel was asleep, I tried to talk to Gareth. I found him in his office, surrounded by papers and file folders. "We need to discuss what happened at dinner," I said. He didn't look up from his computer. "Do we?" "Yes. I was trying to be honest about our problems. Maybe I could have chosen a better time and place, but the issues I raised are real." "The issues you raised?" He finally looked at me, and his expression was completely neutral. "Is that what you're calling it?" "Gareth, I'm trying to save our marriage. I'm trying to address the fact that we've grown apart, that we don't communicate. By announcing your relationship with another man at my birthday dinner in front of my family." "It's not a relationship, it's a friendship. And yes, maybe there are feelings there, but I'm being transparent about it instead of sneaking around." "How noble of you." His calm was unnerving. I'd expected anger, hurt, some kind of emotional reaction. This cold politeness was worse than yelling. "What are these papers?" I asked, gesturing at his desk. "Work documents." "Gareth, I'm trying to fix this. I'm trying to be honest about what's wrong so we can work on it together." He saved something on his computer and closed the laptop. "I'm going to bed." "In the guest room again?" "Yes." "For how long?" "I don't know, Morwenna. How long does it take to process your wife telling a restaurant full of people that she's emotionally involved with another man because her husband doesn't pay enough attention to her?" "That's not what I said. Isn't it?" After he left, I sat in his office chair, looking at the neat stacks of papers. Bank statements, I realized. Credit card bills. Insurance documents. Everything was highlighted in yellow marker, with notes in Gareth's precise handwriting. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't work. This was something else entirely. The next day at work, Callum approached my desk during lunch. "We need to talk," he said quietly. We went to the coffee shop across the street, finding a corner table away from our co-workers. "This is getting complicated," he said without preamble. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Janet called me into her office this morning, asked about our friendship. Apparently someone's been keeping track of our conversations. She talked to me too, but we haven't done anything wrong." Callum stirred his coffee nervously. "Morwenna, about that night you called me, about what you said." "What about it? Did you mean it? About leaving him?" I stared at him across the small table. 3 weeks ago, drunk and lonely, I'd felt so certain. Now, with Gareth's strange calm and Isabel's worried questions, everything felt different. "I don't know," I admitted, "because if you didn't mean it, we should probably cool things down. I can't afford workplace drama right now. I'm still in my probationary period." "So this is about your job?" "This is about being realistic. You have a family more. You have a life. And I'm not sure I'm ready to be the reason you blow it up." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You're backing away." "I'm being smart. Maybe you should too." That afternoon, I tried calling Claire, but she didn't pick up. When I checked social media, I noticed she hadn't liked any of my posts since the dinner. A creeping sense of isolation began to set in. When I got home, Gareth's car wasn't in the driveway. Isabel was at his mother's house. I found the note on the kitchen counter. The house felt enormous and empty. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. I'd been honest. I'd been brave. I'd tried to address our problems instead of letting them fester. So why did I feel like I was losing everything? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the show at Bistro Laurent. Classy. Hope it was worth it." Someone had been there that night. Someone had seen my confession and was now spreading it around. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My private moment of honesty had become public entertainment. I was still sitting at the table when Gareth came home 2 hours later, alone. "Where's Isabel?" I asked. "Spending the night at my mother's." "Why?" "She asked if she could. I said yes." "Without checking with me first?" He looked at me for a long moment. I didn't realize I needed permission to let my daughter visit her grandmother. "She's our daughter, Gareth." "Yes," he said quietly. "She is." Something in his tone made my blood run cold, but before I could ask what he meant, he'd disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone with my wine and my growing fear that I'd set something in motion that I couldn't control. The next few days brought a series of small, unsettling changes. Gareth's morning routine shifted. He started leaving for work 30 minutes earlier, claiming new meetings. He stopped asking about my day. He spoke to Isabel in careful, gentle tones, but barely acknowledged my presence. I found the folder by accident. I was looking for our tax documents in his office when I saw it. A manila folder labeled Household Statements in Gareth's neat handwriting. Inside were bank statements going back 6 months, all marked with yellow highlighter. Credit card bills with certain charges circled in red. Phone bills with call logs highlighted. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. Every dinner out was noted. Every unusual expense was marked. And there, highlighted in bright yellow, was my call to Callum on that November night. 11:47 p.m., duration 23 minutes. But it wasn't just one call. As I looked closer, I saw other calls to Callum's number. Calls I'd forgotten about, brief conversations during lunch breaks, quick check-ins about work projects. Innocent calls that, when documented like this, looked like something else entirely. "What are you doing?" I spun around. Gareth stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I was looking for our tax documents," I said, clutching the folder. "What is this?" "Exactly what it looks like." "You're spying on me, documenting my phone calls." "I'm documenting facts. Phone records are public information on our shared plan. Bank statements show shared account activity. Credit card bills show shared expenses." "But why?" He stepped into the office, and gently took the folder from my hands. Because you told a restaurant full of people that you're emotionally involved with another man. Because you've been having extended personal conversations with your ex-boyfriend. Because you promised to leave your husband. I was drunk when I said that. Were you drunk during all these other calls? He flipped through the highlighted phone bills. Were you drunk when you had lunch with him 3 times last month? Were you drunk when you bought new lingerie the day after your first work meeting with him? I stared at the credit card statement he was pointing to. Victoria's Secret, $127.43, the day after Callum and I had grabbed coffee to discuss the Morrison account. I'd forgotten about that purchase, but seeing it highlighted in red made it look calculated, deliberate. This is crazy, Gareth. You're making innocent things look suspicious. I'm not making anything look like anything. I'm simply organizing information. Information for what? He didn't answer, just filed the folder away in his desk drawer and locked it. That night, I called Claire. She finally picked up on the 4th ring. Hey, she said, but her voice was different, cooler. Claire, thank God. I need to talk to someone. Gareth is acting strange, and work is weird, and I feel like I'm going crazy. Morwenna, I don't think I'm the right person to talk to about this. What do you mean? You're my best friend. I mean that what happened at dinner was really uncomfortable for everyone. Reuben hasn't stopped talking about it. He thinks you humiliated Gareth in public. I was being honest about our problems. You announced that you're having an emotional affair at your husband's birthday dinner, in front of his mother. There's a difference between honesty and cruelty. The word hit me like a slap. Cruelty. Morwenna, if you're unhappy in your marriage, there are ways to handle that. Private ways. Adult ways. What you did was... She trailed off. Was what? It was selfish. And it was mean. After she hung up, I sat in my empty living room, feeling the walls of my life closing in. At work, I was being watched and whispered about. At home, my husband was documenting my every move. My best friend thought I was cruel. My daughter was spending more and more time at her grandmother's house. I'd thought I was being brave and honest, but maybe I was just being destructive. The next morning, I found Gareth in the kitchen making coffee for one. Can we please talk about this? I asked. About what? About us, about our marriage, about how to fix this. He poured his coffee and added cream with the same measured movements he used for everything. What would you like to fix specifically? The distance between us. The way you're treating me like a stranger. The way you're documenting everything I do like I'm a criminal. I'm treating you exactly the way you've asked to be treated. What does that mean? You said I don't pay attention to you, so I'm paying attention. You said you want honesty, so I'm being honest. I don't trust you anymore. You said you're thinking about leaving, so I'm preparing for that possibility. By spying on me? By protecting my interests, and Isabel's interests. Isabel's interests. She's my daughter, too. Yes, he said quietly. She is. And she's been asking a lot of questions lately about why Mommy and Daddy don't sleep in the same room anymore. About why Grandma Marjorie looks sad when she visits. About why her friends' parents whisper when they see us at school pickup. My stomach dropped. People are talking at school. Apparently, someone who was at the restaurant that night has a child in Isabel's class. Word gets around in small communities. I felt sick. Gareth, I never meant for any of this to happen. What did you mean to happen? I meant for us to talk about our problems. I meant for you to realize that we've grown apart and that we need to work on our marriage. By threatening to leave me for another man. I wasn't threatening. I was expressing how I felt. He rinsed his coffee mug and placed it in the dishwasher with the same careful precision he applied to everything else. The difference is, he said, I don't think you actually know how you feel. I think you know how you want to feel, and you're willing to burn everything down to get there. After he left for work, I sat in the kitchen, trying to make sense of what was happening. Everything I'd done had been in service of honesty, of addressing our problems, of refusing to live in quiet desperation. So, Why did it feel like I was the only one paying the price for that honesty? My phone buzzed with a text from Callum. Janet wants to see us both at 2 p.m. This is getting out of hand. I stared at the message, realizing that my brave moment of truth-telling had created a mess that was spreading into every corner of my life. And the person who seemed most in control of the situation was my quiet, methodical husband, who was apparently 3 steps ahead of me in a game I didn't even know we were playing. The meeting with Janet was a disaster. She sat across from Callum and me in her sterile office, a thin file folder between her hands. "I'm going to be direct," she said. "There have been multiple reports of inappropriate workplace conduct, personal phone calls during work hours, extended private meetings, and what several colleagues have described as intimate conversations in common areas." "Who reported this?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect. "That's confidential, but the reports are detailed and consistent." She opened the folder, revealing printed emails and what looked like a timeline. "More concerning is that this situation has apparently spilled over into your personal lives in ways that are affecting workplace morale." Callum shifted uncomfortably beside me. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I mean that your personal drama has become office gossip, and when personal drama affects professional environments, we have to take action." She slid a piece of paper across the desk. "Callum, you're being transferred to our downtown location, effective immediately. The transfer comes with a salary adjustment to compensate for the longer commute." "You're transferring me because of rumors?" he asked. "I'm transferring you because maintaining professional boundaries is part of your job description, and those boundaries have been compromised." After Callum left, Janet turned to me. "Morwenna, you've been with the company for 4 years. You have a good track record, but this situation has put you in a difficult position." "I haven't done anything wrong." "You've allowed your personal life to interfere with your professional responsibilities. That's something we need to address." She handed me another paper. "This is a formal reprimand. It goes in your file. Any future incidents of personal conduct affecting workplace dynamics will result in termination." I drove home in a daze. In the span of 3 weeks, I'd lost my best friend. My marriage had imploded, and now my job was in jeopardy, all because I'd been honest about my feelings. When I got home, Marjorie's car was in the driveway. I found her in the kitchen with Gareth, both of them sitting at the table with papers spread between them. "Morwenna," Marjorie said coolly, "we need to discuss arrangements for Isabel." "What kind of arrangements?" Gareth looked up from the papers. "Arrangements for her care during this transition period." "What transition period?" "The transition period while we figure out our living situation," he said calmly. "Our living situation is that we live here, together, as a family." Marjorie made a small noise of disapproval. "Dear, I think we're past pretending this is a functional family environment." "Excuse me?" "Isabel is confused and upset. She's been asking questions that no 5-year-old should have to ask. She needs stability." "She has stability. She has a home and her parents. She has a mother who announced her affair at a public restaurant and a father who's trying to hold things together," Marjorie said sharply. "It wasn't an affair." "What would you call it?" Gareth asked quietly. I looked between them, realizing this wasn't a casual conversation. This was a coordinated intervention. I would call it honesty about problems in our marriage that we need to work through together. "Problems that you created by pursuing another man," Marjorie said. "Problems that existed long before Callum came back into my life." "Did they?" Gareth asked. "Because I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about when things changed between us. And it seems to coincide pretty closely with when Callum started working at your company." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Because I have 6 months of phone records that suggest otherwise." He pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the first. "April 15th, first call to Callum's number, 23 minutes. April 18th, lunch at Café Luna, charged to your credit card for 2 people. April 22nd, Victoria's secret purchase. April 25th, second call to Callum's number." "You're documenting my life like I'm a criminal." I'm documenting facts. Would you like me to continue? Stop it, both of you, Marjorie interjected. Isabel will be home soon and she doesn't need to hear this. Where is she? I asked. Toby picked her up from school. They're at the park. Without asking me. I asked Toby to give us some time to talk, Gareth said. About what exactly? He gathered the papers into a neat stack. About the fact that you're going to move out. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You're going to move out temporarily, while we figure out custody arrangements and property division. I'm not moving anywhere. This is my house. Actually, Marjorie said, pulling out another document, it's Gareth's house. The deed is in his name only, as is the mortgage. You have no legal claim to it. I stared at the paper she'd placed in front of me. It was true. When we'd bought the house, Gareth's credit score had been better, so we'd put everything in his name to get a better interest rate. I'd never thought about the implications. You can't kick me out of my own home. I'm not kicking you out, Gareth said. I'm suggesting that you take some time to figure out what you actually want. You said you were thinking about leaving. I'm giving you the opportunity to do that. And if I refuse, then we'll proceed with formal legal separation proceedings. Either way, Isabel stays here, in her home, with consistent care. You can't take my daughter away from me. I'm not taking her away. You can see her whenever you want, but she needs stability, and right now you're not providing that. I looked between Gareth and his mother, realizing this had been planned. They'd researched, documented, and strategized while I'd been stumbling through each day, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. How long have you been planning this? Since the night you called your ex-boyfriend and promised to leave me, Gareth said quietly. You knew about that call. I've known about all of it, Morwenna. The difference is, I don't make major life decisions when I'm drunk. I make them when I'm thinking clearly. That evening, after Marjorie left and Isabel was asleep, I sat in my living room with a suitcase, trying to figure out how I'd gone from being honest about my feelings to being evicted from my own life. Gareth appeared in the doorway. The apartment above the Hendersons' garage is available. It's furnished, and it's close enough that you can see Isabel every day. You've already arranged housing for me? I've explored options. The choice is still yours. What choice? You've made it clear that if I don't leave voluntarily, you'll force me out legally. I've made it clear that actions have consequences. You wanted honesty. Here's honesty. I don't trust you anymore. I don't believe you're thinking clearly. And I won't let Isabel suffer while you figure out what you want. What I want is my family back. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to blow it up. As I packed my clothes, I kept thinking about that first phone call to Callum. I'd been drunk and lonely, feeling invisible and unappreciated. All I'd wanted was to feel seen, to feel valued, to feel like I mattered to someone. Now I was more invisible than ever, packing a suitcase while my husband calmly dismantled our life with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else. I'd thought I was being brave. I'd thought I was being honest. I'd thought I was fighting for something better. Instead, I'd given him all the ammunition he needed to win a war I didn't even know we were fighting. The apartment above the Hendersons' garage was small, clean, and utterly depressing. One room with a kitchenette, a bathroom the size of a closet, and a window that looked out onto the alley behind the main house. I'd gone from a 3-bedroom suburban home to a glorified studio in the span of one conversation. Mrs. Henderson, a widow in her 70s, had been kind but curious when I'd called about the rental. It's just temporary, I'd explained, while my husband and I work through some issues. Of course, dear, these things happen. The important thing is that little Isabel has stability during the transition. Even Mrs. Henderson knew about Isabel. Even Mrs. Henderson was thinking about my daughter's welfare before my own feelings. The realization stung more than I wanted to admit. I'd been in the apartment for 3 days when the legal papers arrived. The knock came at 6 p.m. sharp. A woman in a professional suit stood at my door with a manila envelope. Morwenna Vale? Yes. You're being served with divorce papers. Have a good evening. She was gone before I could respond, leaving me standing in my tiny doorway with the envelope that would officially end my marriage. Inside were documents I didn't understand, filled with legal language about irreconcilable differences and custody arrangements and division of assets. But one section was clear enough. Gareth was asking for primary custody of Isabel, with me getting supervised visitation until the court can assess the stability of the respondent's living situation. Supervised visitation, like I was a danger to my own daughter. I called the number on the lawyer's letterhead, but got an answering service. I called Gareth, but he didn't pick up. I called Toby, desperate for someone in the family to explain what was happening. "Morwenna," he said carefully, "I wondered when you'd call. Did you know about this? About the divorce papers?" I knew Gareth was consulting with a lawyer. I didn't know the timeline. "Toby, this is insane. We're having marital problems, not a custody battle. I'm not an unfit mother." "Nobody's saying you're unfit, but Isabel's been asking a lot of questions lately. She's confused about why you moved out, why Mommy and Daddy don't live together anymore." "I didn't choose to move out. Gareth forced me out." "Did he? Because from what I understand, you've been saying for months that you wanted to leave." "I said I was thinking about it. I said I was unhappy. That doesn't mean I wanted to abandon my family." There was a long pause. "Morwenna, can I ask you something? What did you think was going to happen?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what did you think would happen when you told a restaurant full of people that you were emotionally involved with another man? What did you think would happen when you told your ex-boyfriend that you were going to leave your husband?" I thought Gareth would realize we had problems. I thought we'd get counseling. I thought we'd work on our marriage. By threatening to leave him for someone else? I wasn't threatening. I was being honest about my feelings. "Morwenna," Toby said gently, "honesty without kindness is just cruelty. And what you did to my brother was cruel." After he hung up, I sat in my small apartment, staring at the legal papers spread across my tiny table. Somewhere along the way, my story had been rewritten. I was no longer the neglected wife seeking attention and validation. I was the cruel woman who'd humiliated her husband in public and threatened to abandon her family for an old boyfriend. The next morning, I drove to Isabel's school for pickup, something I'd done hundreds of times before. But when I approached her classroom, her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, intercepted me. "Mrs. Vale, I need to speak with you." "Is everything okay? Is Isabel all right?" "Isabel is fine, but I have instructions that she's to be picked up only by her father or grandmother until further notice." "Instructions from whom?" "From the school administration. There's apparently some kind of family situation that requires special arrangements." I felt my face burn with embarrassment. "I'm her mother." "I understand, but I have to follow the instructions I've been given." Through the classroom window, I could see Isabel coloring at her desk, unaware of the conversation happening outside. She looked small and focused, her tongue sticking out slightly, the way it did when she was concentrating. "Can I at least say hello to her?" Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. "I think it would be better if you worked this out through the proper channels." I drove home, to the apartment, not home, feeling like a stranger in my own life. Everything that had defined me for the past 6 years was being systematically removed. My house, my husband, my role as Isabel's primary caregiver, even my ability to pick her up from school. That evening, Gareth called. "We need to discuss visitation," he said without preamble. "I want to see my daughter." "You can see her this Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I'll drop her off at the apartment." 6 hours, that's it? That's what the temporary custody order specifies. "What temporary custody order?" "The one that was filed with the divorce papers. You might want to read the documents more carefully." "Gareth, this is crazy. I made some mistakes, but I don't deserve to be treated like a criminal." "You don't think so?" No, I don't think so. You announced your affair at my birthday dinner. You humiliated me in front of my family. You've been lying to me for months about your relationship with another man. You promised to leave me for him, and when I documented your behavior, you called it spying. I called it spying because that's what it was. I called it preparing for the inevitable. You told me you wanted to leave, Morwenna. I'm simply helping you do that in an orderly way. I don't want to leave. I want to fix our marriage. Our marriage ended the night you called Callum and promised to leave me. Everything since then has just been paperwork. After he hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine, the cheap kind, since my access to our joint accounts had been frozen, and tried to figure out where everything had gone wrong. I'd been lonely. I'd been feeling invisible and unappreciated. When Callum came back into my life, he'd reminded me of who I used to be, of what it felt like to be seen and valued. The attention had been intoxicating, and yes, I'd let it go too far. But I'd tried to be honest about it. I'd tried to address our marital problems openly instead of sneaking around. I'd thought that honesty was better than deception. Instead, my honesty had given Gareth everything he needed to dismantle our life with surgical precision. While I'd been stumbling through my feelings, he'd been building a case. While I'd been trying to save our marriage through brutal transparency, he'd been preparing for its end. Saturday morning came too slowly and ended too quickly. Isabel arrived at 10 a.m. sharp, delivered by Gareth with a small overnight bag and a list of instructions. Her lunch is packed. She needs to be back by 4. She has homework in the blue folder. Gareth, can we please talk? About what? About us. About our family. About finding a way to fix this. He looked at me for a long moment. Morwenna, there is no us anymore. There's you and there's me and there's Isabel. And Isabel's welfare is the only thing that matters now. She's my daughter too. Yes. And if you'd remembered that before you decided to blow up her family, we might not be having this conversation. The 6 hours with Isabel were both wonderful and heartbreaking. She was confused about the apartment, about why Mommy lived in a different place now, about why she couldn't stay overnight like she used to at Grandma Marjorie's. When are you coming home, Mummy? I don't know, sweetheart. Did you and Daddy have a fight? We're having some grown-up problems that we need to work out. Like when Tommy's parents got divorced. The word hit me like a physical blow. We're not divorced, Isabel. We're just figuring things out. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The papers on my kitchen table made it clear. We were getting divorced. Gareth had made that decision with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else, and I was just along for the ride. When he came to pick her up at 4, Isabel hugged me extra tight. I love you, Mummy. I love you too, sweetheart, so much. Will I see you next week? Yes, next Saturday. After they left, I sat in my empty apartment, staring at the legal papers I still didn't fully understand. Somewhere in those documents was the end of everything I'd thought I wanted to save. I'd been honest about my feelings. I'd been transparent about our problems. I'd refused to live in quiet desperation. And I'd lost everything. 6 months later, the divorce was final. The settlement was exactly what Gareth had proposed from the beginning. He kept the house. I got supervised visitation with Isabel every other weekend, and our assets were divided according to a formula I still didn't completely understand. Callum had moved to the downtown office and gradually stopped responding to my texts. Claire had unfriended me on social media and avoided me at the grocery store. Even Toby, who'd tried to stay neutral, had chosen his brother's side when forced to pick. I'd taken a lower-paying job at a small firm across town, grateful to escape the whispers. I kept my history quiet. The apartment above the Hendersons' garage became permanent, cheap, clean, and deserved. Isabel adjusted faster than I did. She talked about math with Dad, cookies with Grandma, chess with Uncle Toby. She was stable, surrounded by people I couldn't compete with. Nights alone, I replayed the November drunk call to Callum, thinking I was being brave. Instead, I handed my careful husband evidence. He built a file while I chased feelings. In the custody letter, Gareth wrote, "Documentation is everything." Now I understood. Truth freed me, just not gently.